I never thought a simple moment of awareness could change the way I looked at food. For years, I battled with cravings. The late-night fridge raids, the mindless snacking at my desk, the way a bag of chips could disappear before I even realized I had opened it. It felt like food was controlling me, rather than the other way around. Then, one day, while scrolling online, I came across the Mindfulness channel. It wasn't talking about diets or strict rules. It was about pausing, breathing, noticing. That small practice opened a door I didn't even know was there, the door to freedom from my cravings. Obesity is one of the biggest health struggles in America right now. We all see it. Headlines about rising rates, doctors warning us about diabetes and heart disease, people blaming themselves for not having enough willpower. But here's the truth. I wish someone had told me earlier. It's not about willpower. It's about awareness. And mindfulness gives us that missing piece. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Zen master who inspired millions, often spoke about eating an orange. He would say, when you eat an orange, eat only the orange. Don't eat your worries, your fears, your plans. Think about how often we eat, not because we're hungry, but because we're anxious, lonely, stressed, or just bored. The Buddha himself taught that craving is one of the roots of suffering. But he didn't condemn craving. He taught us to meet it with awareness, to see it clearly, and in that seeing, craving loses its grip. Science now confirms what these ancient teachers already knew. Harvard studies show that mindful eating reduces binge eating and emotional eating. UCLA researchers found that people who practiced mindfulness actually changed the way their brains responded to food cues, lowering activity in areas linked to reward and compulsion. In other words, the brain can be trained to respond differently, not by force, but by awareness. I remember sitting at my kitchen table one evening with a chocolate bar in front of me. Normally, I would have eaten it without thinking, probably reaching for a second piece before finishing the first. But I decided to try what I had learned from a guided practice by Jon Kabat-Zinn, one of the pioneers of mindfulness in the United States. He encouraged slowing down, noticing texture, smell, the way your mouth waters before you even take a bite. So, I unwrapped the chocolate slowly, held it in my hand and actually looked at it. I smelled it. Then I placed a small piece on my tongue and waited. It melted, releasing flavor I had never noticed before. And here's what surprised me most. I didn't need more. For the first time in years, one small piece was enough. That's the power of mindfulness. It interrupts the autopilot. It gives you a chance to ask, am I really hungry? Or am I looking for comfort? Am I filling my stomach? Or am I trying to fill an emptiness inside? Sharon Salzberg, one of America's most beloved meditation teachers, often reminds her students that mindfulness isn't about judgment. It's about curiosity. Instead of labeling yourself as weak when a craving shows up, you get to gently ask, what is this craving really about? The Buddha taught that when we bring awareness to desire, we begin to see its impermanence. A craving feels overwhelming at first, like a wave about to crash over us. But if we pause, breathe, and observe, we realize the wave rises and then falls. It doesn't last forever. Thich Nhat Hanh once said, feelings come and go like clouds in a windy sky. Conscious breathing is my anchor. In the same way, our cravings can come and go if we don't immediately react. Breathing becomes our anchor. I've seen this in my own life. There were nights when stress made me want to devour an entire pizza. In the past, I would have done it without question. But with practice, I started to pause. I would place my hand on my stomach, take a breath, and ask, What do I really need right now? Sometimes the answer was food. Sometimes it was rest. Sometimes it was simply to step outside and feel the evening air. By slowing down, I discovered that half the time my hunger wasn't in my body, it was in my heart. Jack Cornfield tells a story about practicing mindfulness with a young woman who struggled with binge eating. Instead of shaming her, he guided her to sit with her craving, to feel it in her body, to describe it. She realized her craving felt like tightness in her chest, like a restless energy. By naming it, by feeling it without reacting, she found the craving softened on its own. That is the gentle wisdom of mindfulness. We don't have to fight the craving. We simply watch it, and in that watching, it transforms. This doesn't mean mindful eating is easy. In a culture where fast food drive-thrus are everywhere, where stress pushes us to eat on the go, it takes real courage to slow down. But courage doesn't mean force. Courage in the Buddhist sense means turning toward your experience instead of running from it. Imagine sitting with a bowl of rice, as monks in Plum Village do. They eat in silence, chewing slowly, each bite a meditation. You don't need to become a monk, but you can take that spirit into your own life. Even one mindful meal a day can shift your relationship with food. The beauty is, mindfulness doesn't tell you what to eat. It doesn't shame you for loving fries or ice cream. Instead, it helps you enjoy them more fully, in moderation, without the cycle of guilt and overindulgence. When you really taste your food, you need less of it. When you honor your body's signals, you stop eating when you're full. And when you see your cravings clearly, you realize they are not the boss of you. You are free. The Buddha's teachings on the middle way remind us not to fall into extremes, neither indulgence nor denial, but balance. That's what mindfulness offers with food. It's not another diet. It's not another set of rules. It's a way of returning to balance, to trust in your own wisdom. And the science keeps proving this works. A study at Indiana State University found that participants in a mindful eating program lost weight and kept it off longer than those on traditional diets. But even more importantly, they reported less anxiety, more joy in eating, and greater self-compassion. This isn't just about shrinking waistlines. It's about healing our relationship with ourselves. I know firsthand how hard it is to say no when cravings scream loudly. But mindfulness gave me a new option. Not to fight, not to obey, but to pause, breathe, notice, and choose. That choice is where freedom lives. Thich Nhat Hanh taught that freedom is not given to us by anyone. We have to cultivate it ourselves. Each mindful bite, each mindful breath is a step toward that freedom. So the next time a craving hits, try this simple practice. Before reaching for food, take 3 deep breaths. Place your hand on your stomach. Ask, am I hungry or am I something else? Tired, anxious, lonely? Then decide. If you eat, eat slowly, with presence. If you don't, notice the craving rise and fall like a wave. Either way, you win because you're no longer trapped on autopilot. Mindfulness won't erase cravings overnight, but it gives us tools, compassion, awareness, patience that change everything. And when we learn to eat with mindfulness, we're not just saying no to overeating. We're saying yes to life, yes to health, yes to freedom. I used to think cravings were like enemies I had to fight. Every time I smelled pizza or saw a plate of cookies, I braced myself for battle. Most of the time, I lost. The more I resisted, the stronger the cravings seemed to grow. It felt like wrestling with a shadow. But mindfulness taught me something radically different. You don't defeat cravings by fighting them. You understand them, like you would a friend knocking at your door. Thich Nhat Hanh would often invite his students to sit with difficult feelings the same way you would sit with a crying child. Instead of pushing the child away, you hold them gently and listen. He would say, "Hello, my little craving, I see you are here." That kind of tenderness was shocking to me at first. How could I greet the very thing that was making me gain weight? But when I tried it, I realized that greeting a craving with mindfulness was far more powerful than trying to slam the door. I remember one night after work, exhausted and lonely, when the thought of a giant bowl of mac and cheese felt irresistible. Instead of rushing to the kitchen, I sat down and closed my eyes. I placed my hand on my chest and whispered, "Hello, craving, I see you." Almost immediately, I noticed something. The craving wasn't just about food. It was about comfort. It was about wanting warmth after a long day. Once I saw that clearly, the craving softened. I still ate dinner, but I didn't drown myself in cheese. I made a smaller bowl, ate it slowly, and felt satisfied without guilt. John Kabat-Zinn once said, "You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf." That's exactly how cravings work. They rise like waves, often powerful, often sudden. If we panic and fight them, we get tossed around. But if we breathe, notice, and ride them out, we discover that the wave eventually falls back into the ocean. No craving lasts forever. It only feels endless when we don't give ourselves the chance to witness it. There's fascinating research that supports this. A study at Yale University found that smokers who practiced mindfulness were more likely to quit than those who used traditional willpower methods. Instead of trying to suppress their cravings, they learned to observe them as passing sensations. The same principle applies to food. When we sit with the craving, notice how it feels in the body, the restlessness in the stomach, the tightness in the jaw. We begin to see it for what it is, a temporary sensation, not a command we must obey. Sharon Salzberg has a beautiful way of describing this. She says, "Mindfulness allows us to recognize the gap between stimulus and response. That gap is where freedom lives." Without mindfulness, a craving shows up, and before we know it, we're halfway through a pint of ice cream. With mindfulness, a craving shows up, and suddenly there's space. We get to decide, do I want this, or do I just need to breathe? That space changes everything. Of course, mindfulness is not about denying pleasure. Thich Nhat Hanh loved to remind people that eating can be one of the deepest joys of life when done with awareness. He would invite students to chew slowly, to smile while eating, to feel gratitude for the sunshine and the rain in their food. Imagine eating a slice of bread and actually tasting the wheat, the earth, the effort of farmers. When we bring that level of attention, even simple food becomes delicious. And because we're present, we don't need as much to feel satisfied. I once joined a retreat in California led by Jack Kornfield. One of the practices was mindful eating in silence. They gave us each a single raisin, just one. At first, I thought it was silly. How could one raisin be meaningful? But as I held it, looked at its wrinkles, smelled its sweetness, and finally placed it in my mouth, I experienced something new. That raisin felt like a feast. My tongue noticed layers of flavor I had never paid attention to before. By the time I swallowed it, I felt nourished. That moment stayed with me. It showed me that satisfaction comes not from quantity, but from presence. This is why diets so often fail. They rely on restriction and rules, which create a sense of deprivation. Our minds rebel, and eventually we binge. Mindfulness flips the script. It doesn't say, "Don't eat that." It says, "If you eat with awareness." When you do, you naturally find balance. You don't need to punish yourself. You don't need to feel guilty. You simply reconnect with your body's wisdom. The Buddha spoke of the middle way. Not too much, not too little. That wisdom applies perfectly to eating. When we eat mindlessly, we fall into extremes, overeating, binging, or punishing ourselves with strict diets. When we eat mindfully, we find the middle ground. We eat when we're hungry. We stop when we're full. We enjoy food, but we're not enslaved by it. There's also a deep compassion in this practice. Many of us carry shame about our weight, about the times we've lost control, about the way society judges our bodies. Mindfulness doesn't add to that shame. It dissolves it. Sharon Salzberg teaches that self-compassion is essential for any real change. If we approach our cravings with harshness, we stay stuck in a cycle of guilt and rebellion. If we approach them with kindness, we open the door to healing. I think of a friend of mine who struggled with late-night snacking for years. She told me she felt like a failure every morning after overeating. When she started practicing mindfulness, she didn't stop craving snacks right away. But instead of beating herself up, she started pausing. She asked herself gently, "What do I really need?" Some nights she still ate, but with awareness, slowly, without shame. Over time, something shifted. Her portions got smaller, her cravings lost intensity, and most importantly, she began to love herself again. She said, "It wasn't about the food anymore. It was about learning to care for myself." Neuroscience supports her experience. Research at the University of Wisconsin shows that mindfulness strengthens the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for self-regulation. That means the more we practice, the more we literally rewire our brains to pause, reflect, and choose. This isn't just willpower, it's brain power, cultivated through practice. So how do we begin? It doesn't have to be complicated. The next time you eat, just slow down. Take 3 breaths before your first bite. Put your fork down between bites. Chew slowly, noticing texture and flavor. Halfway through the meal, pause and ask, "Am I still hungry or am I satisfied?" These small practices may sound simple, but they are revolutionary. They turn eating into a sacred act, a meditation. Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "To eat is a chance to be in touch with the miracle of life." Every meal is an opportunity to wake up. And when we wake up, food becomes not a trap, but a teacher. Cravings become not enemies, but guides showing us where we are hurting, where we need care. Mindfulness doesn't take food away from us. It gives it back to us in its truest form, nourishment for body and soul. The first time I ate mindfully, I realized I wasn't just feeding my stomach. I was feeding my awareness, my gratitude, my connection to life. And in that realization, my relationship with food began to heal. Not overnight, not perfectly, but step by gentle step. That's the path mindfulness offers. Not another diet, not another set of rules, but a journey back to ourselves, one bite, one breath, one moment at a time. Do you want part? I often wondered why it felt so impossible to resist certain foods. Why could I say no to a second helping of vegetables, but feel powerless in front of a donut box at the office? For a long time, I thought it was just me being weak. But mindfulness and science taught me a different story. Cravings aren't proof of failure. They're a mix of biology, psychology, and habit. And with awareness, we can retrain both the mind and the body. The Buddha once said, "With our thoughts, we make the world." Neuroscience now shows us how true that is. When we repeatedly give in to cravings, our brains build stronger pathways around reward. Each time we mindlessly eat chips in front of the TV, we reinforce the pattern. TV equals chips, stress equals cookies, loneliness equals ice cream. Over time, these loops become automatic, like ruts carved into the road. But mindfulness interrupts the rut. By pausing, breathing, and observing, we create space for new pathways. Jon Kabat-Zinn described mindfulness as falling awake. In the context of eating, it means waking up to the moment between impulse and action. I once read a study from Harvard where participants were guided through mindful eating practices for just 6 weeks. Many reported not only weight loss, but also something more profound: freedom. They said food no longer felt like a prison. They felt more in control, less reactive. That struck me deeply, because control around food had always felt impossible. But it wasn't about control in the strict sense. It was about awareness. Thich Nhat Hanh often invited his students to practice stopping. He would ring a bell, and everyone, no matter what they were doing, would pause, take a breath, and return to the present. Imagine applying that to eating. A craving arises. Instead of rushing to the pantry, you stop. You breathe. You ask, what's happening here? That one breath can change the entire trajectory of your evening. American teachers like Sharon Salzberg add an important layer to this practice: compassion. She teaches that when we pause with kindness instead of judgment, the craving loses its sharp edge. I once tried this during a stressful afternoon at work. I wanted nothing more than to devour a candy bar from the vending machine. I closed my eyes and said gently, "This is stress. This is craving." Just naming it, without judging it, made it feel lighter. I still had a snack, but I chose fruit instead of candy. Not because I forced myself, but because the space gave me clarity. Jack Kornfield tells a story about a student who struggled with compulsive eating. He guided her to imagine each craving as a visitor knocking on the door of her heart. Instead of slamming the door shut, he encouraged her to open it and say, "Welcome. Come in. Let me get to know you." The student realized that most of her cravings were tied to emotions: sadness, boredom, fear. By greeting them instead of fighting them, she discovered they lost their power. That story stayed with me because it reminded me that cravings are not enemies. They are messages. And when we listen, we learn what we truly need. Science backs this up in surprising ways. At UCLA, researchers scanned the brains of people practicing mindfulness while exposed to food cues. They found that activity in the amygdala, the part of the brain tied to stress and compulsive behavior, decreased, while areas of the prefrontal cortex responsible for decision-making lit up. In simple terms, mindfulness literally rewires the brain to give us more choice. Instead of reacting automatically, we can respond wisely. This makes me think of the Buddha's teaching on the 2 arrows. The first arrow is the craving itself. It hurts, it's uncomfortable. The second arrow is the guilt, shame, or judgment we pile on top of it. Most of our suffering, he taught, comes from that second arrow. Mindfulness takes away the second arrow. We see the craving for what it is, just a sensation, just a thought. Not good, not bad, just passing through. When I first started experimenting with mindful eating, I noticed something almost magical. The foods I thought I couldn't live without began to lose their hold. I used to crave soda constantly. But when I drank it mindfully, actually tasting the sweetness, noticing the fizz, feeling the sugar rush, I realized it wasn't as satisfying as I thought. After a few weeks of paying attention, I didn't want it anymore. Not because I banned it, but because my awareness saw it clearly for what it was: a momentary high followed by a crash. That clarity freed me. Thich Nhat Hanh would often say, The most precious gift we can offer others is our presence. I think the same is true for ourselves. When we offer our full presence to the act of eating, we give ourselves a gift. Food becomes more delicious, our bodies feel more respected, and our hearts feel lighter. We no longer eat out of compulsion, but out of care. One night, I tried an exercise from Sharon Salzberg. She encouraged us to sit with a craving and journal about it. What does it feel like? Where do you notice it? What emotion is tied to it? I wrote about my craving for salty snacks. I noticed tension in my shoulders, a restless energy in my jaw, and a heaviness in my chest. When I saw those sensations on paper, I realized the craving wasn't really about salt, it was about stress. And once I named it, the craving lost its intensity. It felt like shining a flashlight into a dark room. Suddenly, the shadows didn't seem so scary. The Buddha's path always emphasized awareness, but also balance. He warned against both indulgence and harsh denial. Mindful eating embodies that balance. It allows us to enjoy food deeply without becoming enslaved by it. It lets us honor our cravings without letting them run our lives. That balance, that middle way, is the heart of freedom. Modern psychology has a term for this too: urge surfing. It's the practice of riding a craving like a wave, watching it rise and fall without giving in. This echoes perfectly with mindfulness. You sit, you breathe, you watch. The wave rises, you feel it intensely, and then, without you doing anything, it falls. When I first tried urge surfing with food, I was stunned. The craving that had felt unbearable only lasted about 10 minutes. 10 minutes. For years I had believed cravings were endless, but mindfulness showed me they were fleeting. Jon Kabat-Zinn has a phrase I love: as long as you are breathing, there is more right with you than wrong with you. That reminder helps when I feel overwhelmed by my eating habits. Even when cravings show up, even when I slip, I can return to the breath, to the present, and remember there is goodness here. Mindfulness is not about perfection. It's about beginning again, over and over. And that's what makes this practice so hopeful. You don't have to fix everything at once. You don't need to master every craving. You just need to pause once today. Take one mindful breath before a meal. Taste one bite fully. Those small moments matter. They accumulate. They reshape not just your relationship with food, but your relationship with yourself. I think of Thich Nhat Hanh's gentle voice saying, "Drink your tea slowly and reverently, as if it is the axis on which the whole earth revolves." What if we approached food that way? What if every meal became an opportunity to touch the miracle of life? In that spirit, cravings stop being battles to win. They become invitations to wake up. The most surprising lessons I've learned from mindfulness is that it doesn't stop at the dinner table. The way we eat is shaped long before the fork reaches our mouths. It begins at the grocery store, in the kitchen, in the rhythm of our daily lives. If we bring mindfulness into those moments, cravings lose their grip before they even begin. I remember walking through the supermarket after a stressful day at work. Normally, I would toss cookies, chips, and soda into the cart without thinking. But that evening, I slowed down. I remembered Thich Nhat Hanh's teaching. When you are mindful, you are already dwelling in the miracle. I decided to pick up a single apple and really look at it. I thought of the rain that had nourished it, the soil, the sun, the hands that picked it. By the time I placed it in the cart, the apple felt more alive than the shiny packages of processed food. It wasn't about forcing myself to avoid junk. It was about choosing from a place of awareness. Mindful shopping is a powerful practice. Researchers at the University of California found that people who practiced mindfulness while grocery shopping, pausing before choosing, noticing their body's response to certain foods, were less likely to buy impulsively and more likely to choose nourishing options. It makes sense. Most of our cravings begin with what we bring home. If we fill our kitchens with mindful choices, we set ourselves up for success. Cooking can also become a mindfulness practice. In Plum Village, Thich Nhat Hanh's monastery, the act of chopping vegetables or stirring soup is treated as meditation. I once tried this myself while making a simple pasta dinner. Instead of rushing, I slowed down. I noticed the sound of garlic sizzling, the scent of tomatoes, the way the steam rose from the pot. Suddenly, cooking didn't feel like a chore. It felt like caring for myself. And when I sat down to eat, the meal tasted richer because I had been present with it from start to finish. Jon Kabat-Zinn often talks about bringing mindfulness into ordinary routines. He says, the little things, the little moments, they're not little. Imagine bringing that wisdom to cooking, washing rice slowly, boiling water with attention, tasting soup with gratitude. When we cook this way, food is no longer just fuel. It becomes a practice of presence. Family meals can also transform with mindfulness. I grew up in a household where meals were often rushed, TV blaring, everyone scrolling on their phones. Eating together didn't feel together at all. But one evening, inspired by a story Jack Cornfield told, I suggested we try eating in silence for the first 5 minutes of dinner. At first, it felt awkward, but then something shifted. We noticed the crunch of the salad, the warmth of the bread, the presence of each other. After those 5 minutes, when we began to talk, the conversation felt deeper, more connected. It was as if mindfulness had opened a door to true togetherness. Sharon Salzberg often reminds her students that mindfulness isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. At family meals, that means not judging ourselves or others for how much we eat, not comparing plates, not shaming anyone. Instead, it means listening, tasting, and being present. This is especially healing in a culture where so many people feel judged about their bodies. Mindful meals become safe spaces where food is enjoyed without fear. Science shows that this kind of eating changes more than just our relationship with food. It changes our health. A study at Indiana State University found that families who practiced mindful meals had children with healthier eating habits and lower risks of obesity. Parents reported feeling less stress, and kids described mealtime as more joyful. This is the ripple effect of mindfulness. When we practice it individually, it spreads to those around us. The Buddha once taught that mindfulness is like a lamp, bringing light wherever it shines. When we shine that light on our food, we not only nourish our bodies, but also our relationships. A mindful dinner can be an act of love. It says, I am here with you, fully present. And in a world that moves so fast, that kind of presence is rare and precious. Of course, mindfulness in daily life doesn't mean perfection. There are still days I grab fast food on the run, still evenings when I eat in front of the TV. But instead of beating myself up, I try to bring awareness even to those moments. I notice the grease of the burger, the sweetness of the soda, the way my body feels afterward. Sometimes that awareness makes me enjoy it more. Sometimes it makes me realize I don't need as much. Either way, mindfulness turns even mistakes into teachers. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, when we practice mindfulness, we are already creating a paradise. That paradise doesn't have to wait for a retreat or a monastery. It can happen in a kitchen, in a grocery store aisle, at a dinner table. It happens when we choose to be present. I once spoke with a friend who struggled with obesity for most of her life. She had tried every diet imaginable and always ended up back where she started. Then she discovered mindful eating. At first, she practiced just once a day, putting down her fork between bites, chewing slowly. She said it felt almost too simple to make a difference. But over time, she began to notice changes. She felt full sooner. She craved sugar less. Most importantly, she stopped hating herself. She told me, "I realized food isn't the enemy. My lack of awareness was." That shift, she said, was the beginning of real healing. Jack Kornfield often tells his students, in the end, just 3 things matter: how well we have lived, how well we have loved, and how well we have learned to let go. When I think of mindful eating, I think of that last part, learning to let go. Letting go of autopilot, letting go of shame, letting go of the idea that food is something to fear. What's left is gratitude, joy, presence. Neuroscience continues to reveal how powerful this practice is. MRI scans show that mindfulness increases activity in the insula, the part of the brain that helps us sense our body's signals. That means we literally become better at noticing when we're hungry and when we're full. We stop eating because the bag is empty and start eating because the body is asking. This awareness breaks the cycle of overeating. It reconnects us to the wisdom of our own bodies. And this is why mindfulness is not just another diet trend. Diets tell us what to eat. Mindfulness teaches us how to eat. Diets focus on external rules. Mindfulness connects us to internal wisdom. Diets often lead to guilt and failure. Mindfulness leads to freedom and compassion. It's not about losing weight quickly. It's about transforming our relationship with food and with ourselves. The first time I brought mindfulness into my grocery shopping, I laughed at how simple it felt. Picking up an apple with awareness didn't seem revolutionary. But when I ate that apple later, tasting it fully, I realized something profound. This is how life is meant to be lived. Not rushed, not mindless, not full of guilt, but awake, present, grateful. That's the promise of mindfulness in daily life. Not a perfect body, not a rigid set of rules, but a way of coming home to ourselves. One breath, one bite, one moment at a time. When I first started practicing mindful eating, I thought it was just about food. Slow down, chew more, pay attention. That's what I expected. But very quickly I realized something deeper. Cravings weren't really about food at all. They were about feelings, stress, loneliness, boredom, even joy. Every emotion seemed to find its way to the plate. And if I didn't bring mindfulness to those emotions, I would keep eating to fill a hunger that food could never satisfy. Thich Nhat Hanh often taught that understanding is love's other name. He encouraged us to look deeply at our suffering, not to push it away. In the same way, mindfulness invites us to look at the emotions hiding beneath our cravings. That late-night urge for cookies? Maybe it's not hunger. Maybe it's the sting of loneliness, that restless snacking at work. Maybe it's not about chips. Maybe it's about anxiety. Once we understand the root, we stop confusing emotional hunger with physical hunger. I remember one evening when the craving for ice cream felt overwhelming. I was tired after a long day, frustrated with myself, and ready to numb it all with sugar. But instead of rushing to the freezer, I sat down and breathed. I asked myself gently, what am I really hungry for? The answer surprised me. I was hungry for rest, for comfort, for kindness. Ice cream couldn't give me that, but a warm shower and calling a friend could. By listening to my emotions instead of feeding them, I discovered another kind of nourishment. American teachers often highlight this emotional layer of mindfulness. Sharon Salzberg writes that self-compassion is at the heart of transformation. Without it, mindfulness becomes another tool for self-criticism. She once shared about her own struggles with loneliness and how mindfulness helped her hold that pain without judgment. That lesson is powerful for anyone struggling with weight. The problem isn't weakness, it's disconnection. Mindfulness reconnects us. Science echoes this truth. A study at Brown University found that mindfulness training reduced emotional eating significantly. Participants reported that they no longer reached for food automatically when stressed. Instead, they paused, noticed their feelings, and chose healthier responses. Brain scans confirmed that areas linked to emotional regulation grew stronger with practice. In other words, mindfulness doesn't just change behavior, it changes the emotional wiring underneath. The Buddha taught that craving arises from suffering, but suffering can be transformed through awareness. He used the image of a knot. Craving and emotion twist together, binding us tightly. But with mindfulness, we untie the knot slowly, gently, with patience. We breathe, we observe, we see clearly, and little by little, the knot loosens. Jack Kornfield often tells his students about sitting with grief, anger, or fear the way you would sit with an old friend. He says, when we bring loving awareness to our feelings, they begin to transform. I once tried this with boredom, one of my biggest eating triggers. Instead of grabbing a snack, I sat still and noticed the restlessness in my body. At first, it felt unbearable, like an itch I had to scratch. But after a few minutes, the restlessness softened, and I realized boredom was simply a longing for creativity. So instead of eating, I picked up a pen and wrote in my journal. The craving was gone, not because I fought it, but because I listened. This is why mindfulness feels so different from dieting. Diets say, resist, deny, restrict. Mindfulness says, listen, feel, understand. Diets treat food as the problem. Mindfulness sees food as a mirror, reflecting our inner world. When we look into that mirror with compassion, we stop punishing ourselves and start healing. I think of a woman I met at a mindfulness retreat in Massachusetts. She had struggled with obesity her entire adult life. She told me she used food to soothe her sadness after a divorce. For years, she felt trapped in a cycle of shame and overeating. At the retreat, she learned to sit with her sadness instead of numbing it. She would place her hand on her heart, breathe, and whisper, "Sweetheart, I'm here for you." Slowly, her relationship with food began to change. She lost weight, yes, but more importantly, she said she regained her self-respect. For the first time, she told me, I feel like I am caring for myself, not punishing myself. Neuroscientists describe this process as building resilience. When we meet emotions with mindfulness, the brain's stress circuits calm down. The prefrontal cortex, which helps us regulate impulses, grows stronger. It's like going to the gym, but for the mind. Each time we pause instead of react, we lift a small weight. Over time, our emotional muscles grow. We stop being controlled by cravings because we've learned to sit with the feelings underneath. Thich Nhat Hanh called this watering the seeds of mindfulness. He believed that every moment of awareness is like watering a seed of clarity, compassion, and freedom inside us. Over time, those seeds grow stronger than the seeds of craving. One day you notice the craving is still there, but it no longer rules you. That's the quiet miracle of practice. I've seen this in my own life. Stress used to send me straight to the kitchen. Now, more often than not, Stress sends me to the cushion. I sit, breathe, and let the storm pass. Sometimes I still eat when I'm not hungry. But instead of guilt, I feel curiosity. What was I feeling? That curiosity turns mistakes into lessons, and slowly those lessons reshape my habits. Sharon Salzberg once said, "Mindfulness isn't difficult, we just need to remember to do it." That's the challenge. In the heat of emotion, it's easy to forget. That's why practice matters, daily, even in small doses. Each mindful breath trains us to remember. Each time we pause, we strengthen the muscle of awareness. And eventually, even in moments of strong emotion, we find ourselves choosing presence instead of autopilot. The Buddha often reminded his students, you, yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. For those struggling with obesity, those words are medicine. So much of overeating comes from self-criticism and shame. But when we practice mindfulness, we replace judgment with care. We begin to see that cravings are not failures. They are cries for love. And when we answer those cries with compassion, everything changes. I think back to one of Thich Nhat Hanh's most famous practices, hugging meditation. He invited people to hug each other mindfully, breathing together, fully present. Imagine if we could hug our own cravings that way. Instead of pushing them away or giving in blindly, we could hold them close, breathe with them, and whisper, "I see you, I will take care of you." That shift from battle to embrace is the heart of mindful transformation. The emotional roots of cravings run deep, but mindfulness teaches us that even the deepest roots can be seen, understood, and softened. We don't need to uproot them in anger. We simply shine the light of awareness, and slowly, gently, they loosen their hold. And so, mindfulness with emotions becomes the path to freedom with food. By listening instead of fighting, by caring instead of judging, we discover that cravings aren't the problem. Forgetting ourselves is. With mindfulness, we remember, we return, we come home. When people hear the word mindfulness, they sometimes imagine sitting cross-legged in silence for hours. But mindfulness isn't limited to the meditation cushion. It's a practice we can carry into the kitchen, the office, the grocery store, even a Friday night party. This is where the real transformation happens. Cravings don't wait politely until after meditation. They show up in the middle of life. The good news is, mindfulness can meet us there. Thich Nhat Hanh often said, "Peace is every step." He reminded us that mindfulness isn't about escaping daily life, but embracing it fully. For those of us struggling with overeating, that means practicing not only in quiet moments, but right when temptation strikes. The question is, how? One of the simplest tools is the pause and breathe technique. When a craving arises, instead of rushing to act on it, we stop. We take 3 slow breaths, noticing the sensation of wanting in the body. Maybe the stomach feels tight. Maybe the mouth waters. Maybe the mind is restless. By pausing, we interrupt the autopilot that leads to overeating. A study from Harvard found that people who practiced mindful breathing before meals ate significantly fewer calories. Not because they forced themselves, but because the pause gave them space to make a conscious choice. I once tried this at a birthday party. The dessert table was overflowing with cakes and cookies, and the old me would have grabbed 2 slices without thinking. But this time, I paused, took 3 breaths, and checked in. I asked myself, am I truly hungry? The answer was no. I was simply swept up in the energy of the celebration. So instead of cake, I chose tea. Later, when I did feel hungry, I savored a small slice slowly, without guilt. That little pause changed the whole experience. John Kabat-Zinn, one of the pioneers of mindfulness in America, often emphasizes the power of awareness in the full catastrophe of living. He says we don't need to change our circumstances to find freedom. We need to change the way we meet them. Bringing awareness to cravings in the moment is one of the most practical ways to embody his teaching. Another powerful method is mindful eating itself. Instead of rushing through food, we slow down. We notice the colors, textures, and smells. We chew fully. We pay attention to the point at which the body feels satisfied. This is harder than it sounds because modern life trains us to multitask meals, scrolling on phones, watching TV, eating in the car. But when we eat mindfully, food becomes enough. We don't need to keep chasing satisfaction because we're already present to it. Thich Nhat Hanh created a beautiful practice around this. He encouraged his community to eat in silence for the first 15 minutes of every meal. No talking, no distractions, just tasting and breathing. I tried this once at his monastery, Plum Village, and I'll never forget it. A simple bowl of rice tasted extraordinary, nutty, warm, alive. I realized that half the reason I overate at home was that I never really tasted my food. I was chasing an experience that was already available if only I slowed down. American teacher Jan Chozen Bays, a pediatrician and Zen teacher, wrote a book called Mindful Eating that lays out 7 kinds of hunger: eye hunger, nose hunger, mouth hunger, stomach hunger, cellular hunger, mind hunger, and heart hunger. She shows us that what feels like a craving might actually be a different kind of hunger. Maybe the heart longing for love, or the eyes longing for beauty. Mindfulness helps us identify which hunger is calling, so we can respond skillfully. Maybe we need food. Maybe we need a walk. Maybe we need a hug. Restaurants can be another minefield. Portions are huge, menus are overwhelming, and social pressure often pushes us to overindulge. One mindfulness trick here is to silently rate your hunger before ordering on a scale of 1 to 10. If you're at a 4, you might not need that oversized entree. Another is to put your fork down between bites, really tasting each mouthful. Studies show that people who eat slowly consume up to 20% fewer calories without even trying. But more importantly, they enjoy their meals more. That's the paradox. The slower we eat, the less we need. At home, mindfulness can also be built into routines. Before opening the fridge, pause and ask, what am I feeling right now? This small question often reveals the truth. Am I tired? Am I sad? Am I bored? If it's not true hunger, I can choose a different response. Sometimes I still eat the snack, but even then, the act of asking changes the experience. Eating becomes conscious, not compulsive. Sharon Salzberg talks about the sacred pause as the moment where freedom is born. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose. The pause at the fridge door, the pause before dessert, the pause in the grocery aisle, that's where freedom begins. It's not about willpower, it's about awareness. Nighttime cravings can be especially tough. The day is done, the mind is tired, and the couch calls with chips or ice cream. Here, mindfulness offers another tool: replacement rituals. Instead of heading to the kitchen, create a calming routine. Tea, journaling, a short meditation. Neuroscience shows that habits aren't erased, but replaced. If snacking has been linked to relaxation, we can rewire the brain by pairing relaxation with something healthier. Over time, the brain learns. Comfort comes from tea and stillness, not from cookies. One man I know, a veteran who struggled with obesity, found that evening meditation was his breakthrough. Every time the urge to snack came, he sat down and practiced 10 minutes of breathing. At first, he thought it was impossible, but gradually his brain rewired, and the meditation gave him the same comfort the snacks once did. He lost 60 pounds over a year, not by dieting, but by practicing mindfulness daily. The Buddha taught that mindfulness is like a lamp in the darkness. When we shine the light on our cravings, we see them for what they are, temporary waves in the ocean of the mind. No wave lasts forever. If we can ride it out with presence, it passes. Neuroscientists describe cravings the same way. They peak like a wave and then fade within minutes if we don't feed them. Mindfulness trains us to surf the wave instead of drowning in it. Jack Kornfield often tells his students, "You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf." That's exactly what mindfulness with cravings is. We don't need to fear them or suppress them. We ride them with patience, knowing they will pass. The more we practice, the more skillful we become. There's a quiet empowerment in this. Each time we meet a craving with mindfulness, we prove to ourselves that we are not helpless. We are not prisoners of our impulses. We are aware beings with the power to choose. That confidence builds, one mindful choice at a time, until cravings no longer control us. Thich Nhat Hanh taught, smile, breathe, and go slowly. That's the essence of mindful living and mindful eating. Smile at the craving. Breathe with it. Go slowly enough to see it clearly. In that slowness, freedom opens. Mindfulness doesn't promise perfection. There will still be moments when we eat mindlessly, when we give in to urges, when old habits resurface. But mindfulness changes our relationship to those moments. Instead of guilt, we bring curiosity. Instead of judgment, we bring kindness. And each time we return to awareness, we strengthen the path of freedom. The beauty of mindfulness is that it's practical. You don't need special equipment. You don't need a special place. You don't even need much time. You just need presence. One breath, one pause, one conscious bite. Step by step, moment by moment, this is how we transform cravings, not through force, but through awareness. And when we practice this in everyday life, at the table, in the store, at the party, on the couch, we discover something extraordinary. Cravings lose their power. Food becomes a friend, not an enemy. And life itself tastes richer, fuller, more satisfying. There comes a moment in every journey of change when we realize it's not just about food or weight or habits. It's about freedom. Using mindfulness to face cravings is not merely a technique. It's a way of reclaiming our lives. When we bring awareness to the table, when we pause before the fridge, when we breathe instead of binge, we're saying, I am awake. I am here. I choose my path. Thich Nhat Hanh taught that true freedom comes from being fully present. Many people think excitement is happiness, he said. But when you are excited, you are not peaceful. True happiness is based on peace. Overeating often feels like excitement, a rush, a distraction, but it never brings peace. Mindfulness, on the other hand, is quiet and gentle. It leads us back to balance. The wisdom of American mindfulness teachers echoes this truth. Sharon Salzberg reminds us that we can always begin again, no matter how many times we fall into old patterns. Jack Kornfield often says that forgiveness is at the heart of practice. Not only forgiveness for others, but forgiveness for ourselves. When we slip, we simply return. That return, again and again, is the practice itself. Science confirms what the great teachers have always known. Studies show that mindfulness rewires the brain, strengthening areas linked to self-control and weakening those tied to impulsive behavior. It lowers stress hormones, reduces emotional eating, and increases resilience. But beyond the data, there is something deeper, the lived experience of peace. To eat with awareness, to move through cravings without fear, is to taste freedom directly. I once spoke with a woman who had struggled with her weight for decades. She had tried every diet, every program, and nothing lasted. Then she discovered mindful eating. At first, it seemed too simple. How could breathing with a craving change her life? But step by step, she found that it did. She no longer felt like a failure for wanting food. She learned to watch the craving rise and fall. She stopped punishing herself with guilt. Over time, her body found its natural balance, not because she forced it, but because she listened to it. She told me, "For the first time, I feel like I'm free." That freedom is available to all of us. The Buddha taught that suffering is a part of life, but so is liberation. Every craving we face is an invitation. Will we act on autopilot, or will we wake up? Each moment of awareness is a seed of liberation. When we water those seeds, they grow into strength, resilience, and joy. Thich Nhat Hanh often asks his students to smile at themselves gently, even in struggle. "You are more than your craving," he would say. "You are the sunshine, the fresh air, the whole universe." In those words lies a profound truth. We are not defined by what we eat or don't eat. We are vast and precious, capable of great compassion toward ourselves. So where does this leave us? With hope, with tools, with the knowledge that we are not alone. Mindfulness is not about perfection, it's about practice. Every breath, every pause, every mindful bite is progress. And slowly, the chains of craving loosen. If you are reading this and struggling with food, please know this. There is nothing wrong with you. You are not weak. You are human. And within you is the capacity to meet every craving with awareness, to transform it into an opportunity for freedom. This is the gift of mindfulness. At Mindfulness, we believe in sharing these teachings, not as abstract ideas, but as living practices. Here, we draw inspiration from the wisdom of Thich Nhat Hanh, from the insights of American teachers like Jon Kabat-Zinn, Sharon Salzberg, and Jack Kornfield, and from the timeless compassion of the Buddha's words. Our mission is to help you bring mindfulness into daily life, to the kitchen, the table, and the quiet moments of decision, so that you can live with greater peace, balance, and joy. May you take these practices into your own journey. May you find the strength to pause, to breathe, to taste life fully, and may you discover that the freedom you seek is already within you, waiting to be awakened, one mindful moment at a time. That's the closing part, part 7, with the inspirational conclusion and reintroduction of the Mindfulness channel.